Hello there. My name is Rosie Goldsmith and welcome to Rock Talks, our conversation series featuring literary rock stars from both Romania and Britain. These live hour-long conversations are part of our 4-week literature festival, Romania Rocks, brought to you by the Romanian Cultural Institute in London and the European Literature Network. This is the final week of our festival and we have some tremendous events lined up for you. So please do visit our festival programme on our RCI and ELNet websites. The idea behind Rock Talks is to bring together some of Romania's greatest living writers with their equally brilliant British counterparts. Writers we think have something in common, even though they may never have met and come from very different cultures and countries. Now, this is a reminder, first of all, that all our festival events are free and they're all filmed by London Video Stories, which means that you can watch everything again on our YouTube channel for free, of course. For example, Deborah Levy talking to Magda Carnage, Ben Okri in conversation with Norman Mania, Fiona Sampson with Anna Blandiana. They're quite remarkable and revealing interviews, and they're all different. You can buy most of their books too, in English and Romanian, from our dedicated independent bookstores, all listed on our website. Now, today's Rock Talk is devoted to 2 authors and thinkers who are as well known in their home countries as they are internationally. Elif Shafak and Matéi Vișniec. Welcome to both of you. They both left their homelands, Turkey and Romania, under duress. They both know censorship. They both write in 2 languages, Matai in French and Romanian, and Elif in Turkish and English. And they're successful in both languages too, and translated into many other languages. Today, they live in 2 of Europe's great cities, in Paris and in London. They're adopted homes for the last several decades, but with Istanbul and Bucharest, I'm sure, constantly on their minds. Welcome to my digital sitting room, dear Elif and Matai. And what would you like? Tea, coffee, glass of champagne, glass of wine? I can get it for you virtually, but maybe afterwards, maybe at the end. And before further ado, I'd like also to welcome, sitting quietly in the background, Jozefina Komporaly. Jozefina, are you there?
I am indeed.
Hello to Jozefina. Let's have a glimpse of you, if we may, before we move on with our conversation. Let's see you on screen.
Hello.
There she is. Yeah, I really don't want you to be a disembodied voice because this is Jozefina Komporaly, who is an editor, academic and translator of Matai's work into English. And she's kindly agreed to sit in on the conversation to help Matai with translation should he need it. So thank you all of you for coming. And Jozefina, I'm sure we'll be able to call on you quite easily. I'll just say the magic word, Jozefina, and you'll appear like magic. Thank you so much. Okay, now there is no shorthand, I don't think, that can do justice to our guests tonight. Do look at their biographies on their website. That's why the biographies are there. But for the context of this conversation, let me just remind you that Elif Shafak is a Turkish-British novelist, academic, public speaker and activist. Matéi Vișniec is a Romanian-French playwright, novelist and poet. Now, both of you, I've described you almost as hybrid humans or with hyphenated identities. Is that how you see yourselves? Elif?
Well, first of all, it's really, really wonderful to be able to do this together. I'm very excited about this event. I think I do see myself and human beings, all of us, in terms of multiple belongings rather than singular identities. And in this age, especially, it feels important to me to defend multiplicity. When I look at myself, of course, I'm very attached to Turkey, to Istanbul particularly. I think it's very visible in my work. But I also am very connected to the Balkans in general. Bring me next to a Romanian author, a Greek author, a Bulgarian author, a Bosnian author. I have so much in common. Equally, I have elements in my soul from the Middle East. I'm European by birth, the values that I share. I became a Londoner and a British citizen. And despite what politicians have been telling us, especially because of Brexit, I would like to call myself as a citizen of humanity, a citizen of the world. That doesn't mean you're floating in the air aimlessly. I think it means you can care about many things simultaneously.
Matéi Vișniec, is that how you see yourself as well as multiple identities?
Yes, in fact, I'm so glad to hear, Elif, because sometimes I think we talk too much about identity, and we are looking for only one identity, but we can bear some more identities inside our soul. I can say me too that I was born in a very beautiful region and I belong to this region. And I say I'm born in a small town, my identity is there, I have my root there. But of course, my identity is the Romanian language because I discovered the world in Romanian. Then I moved to France, but when I went to France, I discovered that I was like home in France because my culture prepared, in fact, the school, the books prepared me to feel in Paris like home. Being French for me, it wasn't a sort of strange revelation. I still feel home in France, like I still home in Europe and on this planet, in fact. Of course, I have two very strong identities because I write in two languages. And finally, the liberty which these two languages bring to me is perhaps the most important identity for me. But because I'm so glad to talk now with Elif Shafak, and I know many people from Romania are watching us, and I can say that I'm a bit, how do you call it, a bit moved because Elif, you know, you have many books published in Romania, at least 8, 9 novels, and we have the same editor, the same publishing house, and it's so interesting to meet like that. We are already published by the same editor, but it was the right moment perhaps to have this talk, and I'm sure many people from Romania are watching now because you are here. Thank you for giving your time to us, Elif.
Matai, it means so much to me to hear this from you. I really appreciate it. And we were talking about this earlier. I always feel connected to, throughout my own literary journey, I read so many Romanian philosophers, writers, translated into Turkish. I read them both in Turkish and English, and each left an impact on me, including your voice. So I feel so much, there's so much in common. The way we talk about identity, the way we talk about belonging, exile, but also memory, the things we can and can't forget, collective memory. There's a lot that resonates with me when I read Romanian authors and philosophers. So I'm very happy that, and like you, I feel this was the right time to, I'm glad our paths crossed.
This is just wonderful. Matai, let's look at those first 30 years in Romania, because you were born in 1956 in Romania, northern Romania. Tell us, Elif, about those first 30 years, what it was like. So you were living under communism. You were living in the last years, you were living under Ceausescu, and you left in 1987, so before Ceausescu and the revolution, before he was executed.
Yes, I am born in the wrong part of Europe, if we can say that. I discovered very quickly, in fact, that the country in which I was born, it wasn't a normal country, because people used to talk around me. My father used to listen to the radio from abroad, used to have news only from the radio broadcasting from abroad, from BBC, from Free Europe, from Voice of America. And very quickly I understood that we are living in a strange country where you have to say one thing at home and another thing at school. It was a sort of schizophrenia. How do you call it in English? A sort of schizophrenia in all of us. And very quickly I discovered literature as the only space of liberty, really fantastic for me, where I felt free, where I felt that my imagination was really motivated. And very quickly at 11, 12, I started to write poetry because it was like another language, a sort of langue codée, a language.
A coded
Yes.
language.
And I used to say so many things in this codé, langue codée language, and people were able to understand me. That is one of the reasons I started to write very quickly, but it was a sort of phenomenon at that moment. Very many young people used to write poetry. The poetry and literature really was a sort of source of oxygen at that moment. And when I went to Bucharest to study history and philosophy, I really understood that literature was a sort of cultural resistance. It was a sort of way to say nobody can brush our brain entirely because we can defend us. Poetry, theater, novels, literature, of course, arts were a sort of anticore. Well, and little by little in Bucharest, I discovered that theater, more than novels or than poetry, was a space of resistance because people, living people in front of living actors used to make a sort of complicity. And every show, every play I saw in Bucharest at that moment was a sort of protestation, a sort of manifestation against the power. That was very quickly my school of as a young writer, and I understood very quickly as well that an artist has to be subversive, in fact, if he wants to be recognized as a true artist. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. I understood as well that you have to write good stories before to be a subversive writer. But it was for me a sort of mission to bring both dimensions together, to be a good writer, but a subversive one as well.
Bravo. And you discovered theatre, as you say, but you weren't, and you wrote plays, but you weren't actually performed because your plays were banned under Ceausescu. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. In fact, what I wanted, of course, was to have my plays produced. I used to bring to show them, to propose them to actors, to directors, to all people involved in theatrical life. Of course, my plays were banned or refused, but for me, that was a proof that I was on the right side. In fact, I was very happy to see that my plays doesn't fit with the ideology or the rules of the power. I had some very short plays printed in some magazines. I used to read them in literary cenacle circles, you know. I used to read them to my friends, but only my poems were accepted by censorship. But for me, what was very important at that moment, it was to fight against the censorship, but as well to fight against the self-censorship. And I think this battle, I was a winner. I never l'autocensure. I never accepted the self-censorship. That was my experience there. And I'm sure that the artists, the most of them in Romania, really accomplished their mission. The novels, the poems were so much appreciated by the huge public. And in every novel, when somebody started to read a new novel, translated from foreign languages or from written by Romanian writers, they were looking in these novels the liberty or the criticize lines against the power. In fact, we realized to demolish the ideology, this very oppressive ideology through the literature. It was a mission of the literature at that moment.
I think Elif would probably feel very strongly in favor of what you're saying. I know that Elif herself has spoken before about the liberty of literature, the freedom in literature. And Elif, just to remind people as well that you weren't born in Turkey, but you grew up in Ankara. You were born in Strasbourg a little bit later than Matai, and then you grew up in Ankara, but you moved around quite a bit. But it is Turkey that is your literary homeland, I would say. Tell us about your early years and when you started writing, when you saw literature and stories as your future.
I think what came first was my need for books. The desire to become a writer came later, but the need, it's almost like an existential need for books, that came to me very early on at a younger age. And there's a reason, not because I wanted to become a novelist. I didn't know such a thing was possible. I was a very lonely child. I was an only child, and I thought life was very boring. And literature opened up another space for me. So I realized that in Storyland, I found a home. But before that, maybe I need to explain how I came to that point. I was born in Strasbourg to Turkish parents, and the first house that I grew up in was full of immigrants, leftist students. You know, there were students from all backgrounds talking about revolution, reading Louis Althusser, Jean-Paul Sartre, but not Simone de Beauvoir. You know, a lot of smoke, smoking lots of cigarettes and dreaming of revolution. So that was the setting. From that environment, I came to Ankara with my mother after my parents separated. My father stayed in France and my mother brought me to Turkey because for her, Turkey was motherland. For me, it was a new country completely to discover. And we came to my grandmother's house, which was in Ankara, in a very conservative, very closed and patriarchal neighborhood, where I felt like we were the odd ones out. And from that moment onwards, I was raised by two women, by my mother and my grandmother. It was a bit unusual because I didn't grow up in a typical Turkish family. And I grew up observing the challenges that my mother had to go through as a single mother, as a divorcee, and how my traditional grandmother supported her in that journey. These two women were very different. I know it sounds a bit like a cliche, but in a way they were like East and West. You know, my mother is very modern, very urban, very rational, westernized, you might say. Grandma is pretty much the opposite, more spiritual, more superstitious, and she was an oral storyteller. And in that environment, I found books, and I needed books. After that, I traveled a little bit, Spain, Amman, Germany, back to Turkey, and then I settled down in Istanbul, so I thought, because I thought Istanbul was calling me. I wrote many of my books in Istanbul. I lived long years in Istanbul, and I still carry the city with me. But I also felt suffocated as a writer. So I went to Boston, and then Michigan, and then Arizona, back to Istanbul. And then 12 years ago, I came to the UK. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because life has been a bit nomadic. Even though I spent most of my life in Turkey, life has been a bit of, more peripatetic, more nomadic. And I think I saw literature, the art of storytelling, as an existential glue that keeps my pieces together, that gives me a sense of center, And I always felt free in Storyland.
Elif, there's so much now that I can tell we've got to talk about in this very short hour it's going to be. But let's perhaps just look at a couple of your most recent titles, because the titles themselves are quite ominous and prescient, if you like. I think everything is ominous and prescient at the moment. But last year, 2019, you had your wonderful Booker Prize shortlisted book, 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. A very, very great title. And then just recently, under lockdown, you've published How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division, another extraordinary piece of work. So the fiction and the non-fiction. Now, you don't necessarily tell us how to stay sane, but you do address the various issues as components of modern day sanity, such as power and mental health and all these other issues. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to write these two particular books very close together, and in English, of course. You're writing in English now.
Yes, and I hope we will talk about these journeys between languages. But with regards to these two books, I think even though they're very different, in my mind there are underground tunnels that connect them. And especially the non-fiction book, How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division, it was something that was very much written in this moment in time. As you know, Doris Lessing has this beautiful quote in one of her essays. She describes literature as analysis after the event. I understand that, and I respect that, because we need time as writers. Events happen, and then we need to digest it, we need to process it, and then we write. So in that regard, literature is written in retrospect. However, we've also entered an age in which literature has to become analysis during the event, while things are happening. And so this book was very much written in that moment of pandemic when the lockdown started. And I realized I was struggling with anxiety, anger, fear, or confusion. And then you look around, you realize you're not the only one. So I wanted to start with emotions and try to see if there's a way to turn these emotions into a more constructive, more positive force. But if I may add this, my main starting point is this. We're living in a world in which digital technologies were supposed to give everyone an equal voice, right? We were supposed to be all democratized. You know, all countries were going to embrace democracy thanks to advances in digital technologies and all that kind of optimism, which never came to be realized. But here we are in the age of information, in the age of social media, and in the age of populism as well. And so many people feel voiceless. So many people feel like their voices are unheard. And there's a lot of sorrow, there's a lot of hurt. And I wanted to address that part in particular. How does it feel to be voiceless? And we want to live in a world in which our voices are heard and we can tell stories that have been untold until that moment.
And what you do is, in everything you write, I mean, as you know, because I've interviewed you luckily many times, is that you write, you never provide solutions as such, but you examine ideas and you give us hope. You always give us hope. But you say in this book, How to Stay Sane, you say it's okay to feel not okay. It's fine to feel not fine.
Yeah.
You're amongst friends, in other words.
Yes, and it's more truthful because we don't need to impose on ourselves this, we don't need this forced optimism. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to Matai about. I think when you open a map of Europe and you look at the river Danube, the blue Danube, as you trace it with your finger from Germany towards the Black Sea, as you move towards east, the level of optimism drops. So by the time you reach Romania, Turkey, Bulgaria, we're not very optimistic cultures, and we have a reason, we have complicated histories. All I'm saying is, maybe it's okay for the mind to be more of a pessimist, but the heart has to remain more of an optimist. And that's why I quote that from Gramsci when he talks about pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the heart. We need both in this age. We need a dose of pessimism to understand what's happening in the world, to see what is at stake, to be more aware. But also we need an element of optimism to keep us. And that's going to come from our fellow human beings, and it's going to come from literature and art.
And you spoke about the tunnels joining your two books, with 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world, with your Age of Division book. And I know that there are tunnels, having read both of them. But again, with that novel, with this story of Leyla, the prostitute with the good heart, if you like, in Istanbul, you cover so much ground, but you also give us so much warmth and great hope in spite of her awful, terrible life and her death. It starts with her death. So where are the tunnels? Tell me about that tunnel linking those two books, and then we'll because there's a lot that Matai, I'm sure, will have to say about hearing all this.
Yes, and I was also very interested in what Matai said about self-censorship. So important, because again, I come from a country where because of a poem you write, because of a novel you write, or because of something you say in an interview, you can get into trouble so easily. So there is censorship that comes from above, but then there's also the self-censorship that we internalize, sometimes without being aware of it. And the second thing maybe that I want to add is people realize that it's not easy to talk about politics or political taboos, political issues, but sometimes people don't realize that it's equally challenging to write about gender, to write about patriarchy, to write about sexuality. That too is political. So easily you can find yourself getting into trouble for questioning gender violence or sexual harassment and issues like that. And I think that's also important when we discuss self-censorship. Are we free as writers? We need to ask that question to ourselves. Very shortly about the novel, it has a very unusual beginning. As you know, it starts with an end. It is the last 10 minutes, 38 seconds in the life of a woman, a sex worker in Istanbul. After that book was published in Turkey, I learned that police officers came to my Turkish publishing house asking for copies of the novel, and also one of my earlier novels called The Gaze. And the prosecutor investigated this book for a so-called crime of obscenity. And the only reason I want to mention this is because I think we need to talk about gender and sexuality also, and the challenges of writing on these issues for writers.
Matai, I think that's throwing it open to you, because you spoke about being proud, partly being proud of being censored under communism, because you knew you were doing the right thing by being censored. But what does it do to a writer if they are condemned by their own country in the way that Elif was describing what happened to her? It must be very painful.
Yes, of course. When I left Romania in '87, and I would like to say that I liked a lot this part about being optimistical and pessimistical in the same time. When I left the country, Romania, in '87, I was sure that the dictatorship, communist, the state communist, will still be there for 100 years. Nobody dared in '87, even in '88, to say that one day the communists will collapse so quickly. I moved to France. I was sure that it was forever. And I was sure that in Romania, we will have a sort of dynasty, communist dynasty, like in North Korea. Of course, then the history started to accelerate, and I was so happy, and still I am now so happy to see that in Eastern Europe, we had so huge changes. In fact, everything changed. Romania is now, it belongs to European Union. The liberty of the circulation is something so important. When I left Romania and I crossed the border, the first border, I was in a train from Romania to Hungary, I was sure that the political police will come to stop me and to say, it's okay, Matéi, now you go back to Bucharest, you go back to your town, because we are not so silly. We know that you want to go to the West. Don't dream so quickly. And then I crossed to Hungary, and I said, they are much more perfect. They will stop me at the border with Austrian.
Austria.
And then I crossed the border, and the train went through the Austria. And for the first time in my life, I was 31, I felt something very strange, liberty, to be free. That was at that moment Eastern Europe, a prison, a true prison. And when I arrived to Paris, I had a sort of bursary. I wrote my first novel about Mr. K liberated, because it was a sort of therapeutic novel to understand myself, what liberty means and how to use it. But then I started to write, to work as a journalist. I went to London to work 1 year for BBC, for the Romanian section of BBC. Then I worked since 90, yes, I'm working for 30 years now for French International Radio. And it happened something in my soul, in my being. There are two persons in me. The journalist is something here, and the writer is something here. And the journalist, slowly, he becomes very pessimistical, because the world is a bit crazy. Even the Europe turned in a very strange direction. There are so many countries where the democracy collapsed, and the journalist who is in me is more and more pessimistic. But fortunately, the writer is still in me and are saying, no, we don't have to give up. We have to fight, because the human being is so special, so contradictory, but the human being has imagination. It must be something very good inside. We have to hope. We have to keep the hope alive. That is the manner in which both persons which are in me are collaborating. Sometimes the journalist says, I'm fed up. They are all crazy. This world is a horror. I give up. Bye-bye. But the writer takes some subjects from the journalist, and in my place, I'm trying to understand better the world and the human being. And in that way, I am in the same time pessimistical and optimistical in the same time. And just to finish, I think I was for the first time in Turkey 20 years ago to see one of my plays in Istanbul. It was called Old Clown Wanted. It was produced, directed by a woman, a very good director, Müge Gürman. I don't know if Elif Shafak, if you know her. She used to work for the National Theatre in Istanbul. And when I discovered for the first time Turkey and Istanbul, I was so astonished and happy, because I saw the liberty was there, in fact. Even if there were two countries in only one, but in Istanbul, I saw so many young people, so free, in fact. And for the radio, I used to write at that moment many articles about how Turkey is a model, how to harmonize, how to make a good cohabitation between Islam and democracy. It was a model. 5 years ago, when I went to Istanbul for another play, it was much more set, the atmosphere. And it's really a pity that in Europe, the European model wasn't able to open the other countries around Mediterranean to democracy. This it's the tragedy of my old age, if you want. But as Nietzsche said, it's the only citation I like.
Quote.
Yes.
Citation.
We have to act as if the progress does exist. It's not bad.
You spoke about Istanbul, and I just wanted to ask you both what those cities, what those countries mean to you now you've been away for so long. Because Elif, you haven't been back for a long time, have you? You can't go back. And Matai, you've been back to Bucharest, I know, and you've had your plays performed in Bucharest, and you're a hero in Romania, which must be wonderful, you know, after the decades of not enjoying that. But I wonder what those cities, those countries mean to you now. Elif, what does Istanbul mean to you here now?
I think there's this very deep, strong emotional attachment that never changes. Wherever I am, I feel like Istanbul does come with me. And early on, you were asking me about the underground tunnels connecting the two books. I think it's visible in my novels that there is a desire to tell the stories of Istanbul that have not been told in the main narrative. There is a desire, I have a desire to look at the periphery rather than the center. Of course, as a writer, I'm interested in stories. I love language. I love the rhythm of language, but I'm equally interested in silences and people who have been silenced. So rather than the center, it's always the margins that I want to pay attention. And that is the Istanbul that I carry with me. Not the Istanbul that the Ministry of Tourism presents, but the Istanbul of untold stories, the Istanbul in the margins, the underbelly of the society, the minorities, women's lives, the lives of sexual minorities, ethnic minorities. With all that complexity, Istanbul keeps coming with me. And also, I realized as I was writing this novel, 10 minutes, 38 seconds, most of the things that we remember through emotions, and we remember through senses, like seemingly small things, maybe the smell of street food, or the sound of just a melody that is very familiar. Those are the moments that trigger bigger memories in our minds. So the Istanbul that I carry with me and that I reflect in my writing is very sensual at the same time.
Matai, how is it for you with Bucharest and Romania? I mean, I know that because I've only been able to read some of your work, because not as much as necessary and should be translated into English has been translated. But thanks to Jozefina and a couple of other people, we have got quite a lot, but not enough really to give me an overview of your work. I know you write so-called absurdist plays, you love surrealism. I think you said very cleverly once, you love all realisms except social realism, which I thought was very funny. Very clever, but I'm sure very true. So tell us about what you write and how much of Romania is in that writing.
In fact, many years after I left Romania, I still wrote about liberty, the manipulation of the people by the power, about communism as well, but not only about utopia, about ideology, how the ideology can oppress people, even if the ideology seems to be such a very promising system of ideas. After 1989, I started to go back to Romania to participate to the cultural life in Romania, as I work for the Romanian section of French International Radio. In fact, every day with my head, with my soul, with my articles, because I'm broadcasting in Romania, I am in Romania. I go there usually 4 or 5 times a year. I go for the festival, for book fairs and so on. And I'm very happy to say that Romania finally now is a normal country, because we have democracy. We have the absolutely liberty of to write what we want, to publish what we want. The debates are free. It's a democratic country. It's a normal country with a normal economy. That is a part, the black side, if you want, of the portrait of my country. When I know that 3 million or 4 millions of Romanians are working abroad, it's like a signal. It's not normal. Of course, if 4 millions of Romanians go to work abroad only 1 year, perhaps it's okay, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, but for so many years, Romanians are not able to build a strong economy in their country. I wrote a play about the empty houses in the villages in Romania. In my region, for example, there are so many villages with hundreds and hundreds of empty houses. People are in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, working hard, in fact, in farms and so on, because they are not very, very specialized, you know. Some of them are doctors, of course, but most of them are people working in farms. And they are building houses in their villages, and the houses are empty 10 or 11 months a year. Only in August they go back, all of them, with big cars, with kids, to see them, each other, to have a moment together. This is something very hard to understand and to accept. And I think we cannot say all the time the European Union is guilty, but a bit it is guilty, because the economy wasn't equilibrated inside European Union. We have still to done a huge work to equilibrate economy in Europe. Well, in Romania, we don't have a nationalist party like in some other countries, but for a while I discovered that religion, it's too close to politics. And I'm always scared when these two planets comes too close, politics and religion. There is a sort of danger here. Well, and I would like to say to Elif that many, I think, feminist activists are reading your books, because there is a feminist movement in Romania, and I'm sure some feminists are from Romania are watching us in this moment. I would like to read only 3 or 4 titles of your novels in Romanian, just for the music of the titles. You will understand very quickly, perhaps, the titles. Bastarda Istanbulului, Ucenicul arhitectului, Cele 40 de legi ale iubirii, Lapte negru, Black milk, or Cele 3 fiice ale Evei. It sounds so good, so nice, so interesting, these titles in Romania. I can assure you that you have good translators and a lot of readers, Elif. If the normality comes back quickly next year, really, it would be so interesting to have meetings in Romania with people, with readers, and the feminist activists as well, because it's only at the beginning, this moment,
yeah.
And all this subject you are talking about, genre, sexual, I don't know, culture, these subjects are recent in Romania.
Yeah, it means a lot to me, you know, what you're saying. And I am aware that the translations into Romanian of my novels are good, thanks to the work of the translators, right? So I owe a big thank you. They you know, translation creates wonders. It's so important. I'm very much aware of that. And I'm also aware of the fact that there is an important women's movement and questioning in Romania, because I follow on social media, and I'm very excited to see that, because we have a long way to go. There are inequalities that we need to change and we need to challenge. But if I may say this, the kind of feminism that I believe in, the kind of women's movement that I believe in, brings on board people from different backgrounds. First of all, brings on board women from different cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, but also men, especially young men. Because coming from a patriarchal country like Turkey, I have seen so many times, of course, it's not easy to be a woman in Turkey, but it's not easy to be a man either. You know, where there is patriarchy, it's not easy to be a young man. If you do not fit into the definition of masculinity, yes, for whatever reason, your life can be very difficult. And sometimes women can judge you too. So we have to open up horizons, and we need to bring men on board. We need to bring sexual minorities together. I am very interested in meeting Romanian youth, you know, young readers in particular. So I'm aware of the complexity of the civil society in Romania, and I'm aware of how much you have done in terms of changing from an authoritarian regime into democracy. That is a journey that gives countries like mine hope. You know, it's an important journey. So there's a lot we need to talk about. And one more thing I want to add, when I look at my own country, it has a long history, but that doesn't mean we have a strong memory. I think we are a society of collective amnesia in Turkey. Istanbul, we were talking about earlier, it's a city of urban amnesia. And memory matters, not in order to get stuck in the past, but to learn from the past. So when writers talk about the stories, the untold stories, they're also bringing back memory into collective amnesia. And I find that important as well, so that we can become more mature, so that we can face the mistakes that we have made in the past as different countries, learn from those mistakes, and hopefully never to make them again. So I think memory is also a big part. Memory and empathy are big parts of our work.
You've both also spoken about translation and language, and I just wanted to give a couple of titles also of Matéi Vișniec's work, because the ones we have in English, and because the titles themselves are so wonderful. There's the anthology of plays which Jozefina Komporaly has translated and edited, which is called How to Explain the History of Communism to Mental Patients and Other Plays. And there's this one play in there called The Feeling of Elasticity When Walking on Dead Bodies. And I know there's a novel that's coming out too, which you wrote quite a long time ago. I think you referred to it just now, called The Release of Mr. K, which has just been translated by Jozefina into English. And I wonder, these are absurd titles and they're absurdist ideas. And I know your love of absurdity and UNESCO and so on, Eugene Ionesco, and you live in France, whether that connection with absurdity and absurd theatre and writing has stayed with you consistently, or whether you're falling in love with it again, because I think it is an age of absurdity as well as it's an age of divisions and insanity and all the other issues we've been discussing. So do you love your absurdity still as much as you did?
For me, just to say that when I discovered the word, I discovered that I was living in an absurd world. In effect, when I read for the first time Ionesco and Beckett and Kafka, all of a sudden I saw, look, they help me to understand who I am, where I live, and what are my opportunities. In fact, reading the absurd theater, reading these authors, they gave me a sort of instrument to understand the world. And for me, the history was absurd in my country, not the literature of Ionesco or Beckett. They offered me only keys to understand my world. Of course, I liked so much at that moment, and they were translated. In fact, it wasn't difficult to found them, and even Ionesco and Beckett, they were produced in Romania. It was a kind of schizophrenia in that country because we had access to this literature, but in the same time, when I wanted me to write something very special, the power used to say me, no, you have to respect the socialist realism. Well, that is another story. Finally, even today, I think the absurd literature, Ionesco, Beckett, Arabal, gives us keys to understand why today le langage, the language, no, the langage is so complicated. Even I wonder if this new sort of ideology of politically correctness, for me, it is a part of the absurd theater in a way, you know, because it's a way to practice the self-censorship. I think we still need all these authors to be able to understand what is happened in the society and even in our contradictory soul.
You're both talking in a language which is not your native language. You're speaking to me and us in English, and you live in France, Matai, and you've been living in France for a number of decades now, and you write in France, you write plays in France, and you publish in French. And Elif is writing in English and is speaking to us in English now, and I know you speak several other languages. But what does it mean to have so many languages at your disposal? Is it confusing or is it liberating? Elif?
I think I can't generalize because every writer's path journey might be different. In my case, I love languages and I love the commute between languages. And I think we're living in an age in which you can dream in more than one language. And if you can dream in more than one language, because the mind doesn't recognize those boundaries. Maybe in your dreams, you can see words in French, words in Romanian. It's possible. The mind blends them. I can also write fiction in more than one language, if that's how I feel. This was very difficult to explain in Turkey because I used to write, my first novels were written in Turkish first. And then about 15 years ago, I switched to writing in English first. And this was very unusual, and people reacted in a very nationalistic way, as they often do, and saying, you know, so she's not a Turkish writer anymore, they started saying, because she has abandoned her mother tongue. But that's the problem with nationalism. It's always either or. Are you here? Are you there? Are you one of us? Are you one of them? Whereas I believe you can write in more than one language. You can commute between languages, like James Baldwin used to describe himself as a commuter. And to this day, this is how I feel. I haven't abandoned my mother tongue. I feel very attached to Turkish, and I feel very attached to the English language. My connection with the Turkish language is more emotional. My connection with the English language is more cerebral. And I need both. There is no doubt in my mind that I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant inside the English language. To me, this is an acquired language. The mind always runs faster than the tongue, and the tongue always tries to catch up but fails to do so. That is the experience of being an immigrant. You're aware of this gap that you can never ever close. And you accept that, and you move on with that. So in a nutshell, all I can say, it gives me a sense of freedom, this movement between languages. I need that freedom. And I realize if my writing has sorrow, melancholy, longing, I find these things much easier to express in Turkish. But when it comes to humor, which is very important for me, and irony and satire, I find these things much easier in English. In Turkish, we don't even have a word for irony. We don't do irony, right? So in each language, you find a different anchor for yourself.
I'm glad you brought up humor, because you are very funny in English, I know for a fact. And Matai, you write, is this correct? You write your prose and your poetry in Romanian and
Yes.
your plays in French.
Yes. In fact, when I moved to France, I started to write in French, and I discovered something very special, very interesting for a playwright. I discovered how important it is sometimes to be poor. Poor, I want to say, not to be a king in your language. I was a king in Romanian. I was able to do what I wanted with the Romanian language, to destroy the grammar, to invent words. In French, I was obliged to be humble and to be very careful at each line to be sure to say. I was poor, but in the same time, I tried to be rich with the construction of my play, for example. I wanted to obtain the maximum, the most effects with with few meanings, and it was like a stylistic exercise. And to have as well the feeling to be born again in another language. And the most important thing, in fact, I was born in a country where I knew what that means, the cultural complex. French helped me a lot as a writer, because the most of my plays abroad were translated from French. And again, a very important thing, France is still a paradise for theater. So many companies, so many authors. I wrote for companies asking for me to write plays for them. It was really a sort of cadeau for me to live in France and to write in French. Of course, I translated in Romanian every play I wrote in French. It was a sort of natural mission for me.
Sadly, we're coming to the end of our time together, our hour together. And I just wanted to touch on this particular time now, this pandemic period. Now, you're both very used to having very full diaries and traveling a lot. I think Elif used the word cultural nomads. I mean, you both are nomads with your plays. You go and give lectures, and you attend premieres of your plays, and so on and so forth, and festivals, of course, festivals. And we've not been able to do any of that for the last 8-9 months. And of course, the theatres are closed, which must be of great pain to you, Matai, and for all of us. And I just wonder how you are spending this pandemic time. I know that Elif has written a book of essays. Is it important for you to hibernate and to take this as a break, or do you feel that you have to document it?
First of all, I miss literary festivals, cultural festivals, and I honestly believe they're among our last remaining democratic spaces. We need to defend and embrace cultural festivals and events even more today, because we need them. There's a danger when you go something as severe as a pandemic and economic inequalities. Sometimes politicians think that art is a luxury, that culture is a luxury, that these are not the priorities in this urgent moment in time. We need to say this loud and clear, in my opinion, that art is not a luxury. It is as essential as the bread we need, as the water we thirst for. So it's very important to me that we never give up on actual festivals, actual events. But that said, I find digital events also very important, because what I have observed earlier, we were talking about this, you have people who might not easily access to those venues now able to log in and follow the events. This is important. We should not lose. Maybe from now on, we're going to change the model. Maybe we're going to have both actual festivals and digital festivals. But what matters is that we need books, because we're living in an age of too much information, very little knowledge, and even less wisdom. And I think we need to change this ratio. We don't need this much bombardment of information. We can't even process it. We need true, proper knowledge. But ultimately, we need more wisdom. And for knowledge, we need to slow down. We need books. We need culture, art. For wisdom, hopefully, we need to bring the mind and the heart together, and emotional intelligence and empathy. So all I can say is I believe our need for stories and literature will be here to stay.
Matai, how is this time for you? Have you been as busy as ever? I mean, you can't travel, you can't go to the theatre.
I work very hard as well, all the time. I'm thinking, and sometimes I'm saying to myself, we needed a break. We, humanity. If the virus is a character, perhaps we can image this scene. The virus comes to the human being, human and says, I will disappear when you, the man, the human being, will become clever than you were before. I think we have to think of that as a sort of metaphor, of course, but it's a good moment to change something, generally speaking, in the world, because everything used to go too quickly. It's the right moment to think, to talk, to debate, to understand better what we want, and to change something in the future. This is my feeling in this moment.
Well, I'd like to thank you both so much. And if anybody ever doubts that there can be alchemy or magic in a virtual public space like this, I think these two wonderful people have proven us very wrong. Thank you so much to Elif and Matai. And I want to bring in Jozefina very quickly back on screen, and to apologize for Jozefina that for Matai's English that was so good.
No, in fact, I talk a lot with my hands and with my head. This is the reason I didn't.
Well, I'm so glad you didn't need me, because it would have possibly broken this magic between you. So,
it's so well when you are not very far, believe me. Thank you very much. And
Well,
thank you very much for everything you've done for my theater and my novel, Jozefina.
thank you for writing these pieces.
Wonderful. And hopefully, you know, one day we'll all be back together in this wonderful festival that Elif describes, which we all love so much, these coming together. But I want to thank you all, and Elif Shafak and Matéi Vișniec, and particularly for actually lifting all our spirits, making us smile. I've been smiling through the whole thing. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.